Ben.
Yes.
It's that time of the year again. It's April, it's Geneva, the weather is spectacular, and here we are again.
Indeed.
Watches and wonders.
Here we are. So it's another year. It's a big year for the brand.
Definitely.
A few anniversaries. What would you say are the big anniversaries for this year for you?
You know, usually it's pretty easy.
Yeah.
Arguably 25 is the real number, it's a big number, but 30 also comes to mind. You know, DATOGRAPH and Lange. I think both are very important.
Right.
I would struggle to give a priority. There were other anniversaries that we just took aside, but no, we stick with these two.
All right. So 30 years of Lange 1.
Yep.
And then 25 years of what I think many people would say is kind of the seminal high-end chronograph in the DATOGRAPH. So 1999, back at Basel.
Yes.
Many stories about what happened there and who saw them and who was really kind of shocked to see this watch come out back in 1999. So we actually have quite a few DATOGRAPHs on the table, including one of the first generations.
Absolutely, yeah. You will see later on the booth, actually, we pulled all the different versions together to recognize there aren't that many.
Right.
Amazingly, this watch, and specifically in the two iterations you see here, which is the platinum case black dial and the up and down platinum case black dial, you know, it's if we talk about longevity of a design, epitomizing probably what the DATOGRAPH stands for, with all the color variations, these two obviously never go out of fashion or are always in fashion. And even if you see them next to each other today, you would not think it's old and new. You would just say it's they could actually be the same collection, just adding the power reserve indication to it.
Right. And what was it about the DATOGRAPH back in 99 that made it so different than the other high-end chronographs or chronographs on the market?
I guess the main factor was that it was after a long time of not using a really newly freshly developed chronograph movement, here comes that little company out of Saxony, out of Glashütte, and comes with a chronograph movement that the world hasn't seen.
Right.
The outsized date in combination with off-center dial, which again gives that perfect triangle, and all these little things. I think it was just taken the market by surprise. I wasn't there. I just know it as a watch collector that I saw the one and said, I mean, it is so a Lange Söhne, but at the same time, there was no watch like this in the market.
Right. I mean, back then, for context, Patek was still using a Lemania movement. Vacheron, same. AP didn't have their in-house movement for a decade plus later. So this was really the only, it really was the only high-end hand-wound chronograph in the market.
I guess that ticked the mark in those days because, again, the surprising, it comes from Germany, not from Switzerland, because everybody would have expected something like this from Switzerland and probably would have received less compliments because it's, expectation management. But here it comes, and again, in a time where chronographs were based on a handful of calibers, and we came with one developed in-house.
Right.
And even today, I mean, you look at the movement, and it is still, for a chronograph movement, that's hard to beat.
Yeah, I mean, to me, this remains kind of the benchmark for a real high-end hot horology. Chronograph caliber. And again, it didn't really exist. And obviously the watches made by the brands we mentioned, which were amazing watches, it didn't have the same level of three-dimensionality, of depth. And the finishing here is just taken to such an extreme degree that I think it really kind of shook the idea of what a chronograph could be.
It was, if you compare it with let's say the Lange 1 movement, where we go very traditional with the 3/4 plate, but of course the 3/4 plate will minimize the exposure of the movement to some extent because a lot of the real estate is covered by the ground plate. Here, everything is open. The movement design, as the word says, it's design. It's, yes, there's a functional element in it, but there's also an aesthetical element in it. And only if the two works together, then I think that beauty shows up. And the movement, even today, you look at it and you will not get tired looking at it. It is still very beautiful.
It is. It's one of the great joys of my life is the first time I might explain why I love watches to somebody who doesn't know watches is showing them a Lange chronograph movement.
Thank you, Ben.
The minute they see it, they begin to understand it.
I see them so often, and I don't get tired looking at them. Mm-hmm. The details, it's a face, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's just, you look at it, and the datograph, like the Lange 1, like probably the Zeitwerk, like probably in 10 years, the Odysseus, you look at it, and you will see, that's a.lange Söhne. Even if you take the logo away and you ask anybody that has more than 2 minutes spent on fine watchmaking, you will say that's an a.lange Söhne.
Yeah.
And I think that's hard to achieve in a market where chronographs became more fashionable than they were back then.
Right.
That's also something which you shouldn't forget. For a long time, chronographs were deemed as, the connoisseur's watch. Mm-hmm. So if you wanted to generate some economy of scale, if you wanted to build a lot of watches and sell them, chronographs weren't ideal.
That's for sure.
That was a tiny niche in the market, within the market. And then for a long time, China, as we know in the beginning, they didn't like chronographs because they're rather big. Mm-hmm. We always, I think we always invested into chronographs. From the 1815, I think you have one, if I'm not mistaken, chronograph, mm-hmm. to double split, triple split, to what we're going to launch this year, the DATOGRAPH PERPETUAL TOURBILLON, mm-hmm. But not to forget all the other iterations, the rattrapant. So chronographs, I think it's the biggest department we have in the factory.
Yeah. So let's go through the chronology of the watches we have here. So 1999, first generation, 39 millimeters.
Yes.
And then we have the up-down.
Exactly. 41, that is my sweet spot for me.
Yeah.
Because that was launched 2012, mm-hmm. a year after I arrived, and that was the watch I was definitely involved in. Mm-hmm. I always say if I have to boil down my whole collection to just one watch, hopefully that never happens, but if so, it'll be this one.
Yep. And then we also have the DATOGRAPH Lumen.
Yes.
Which combines another kind of family of Lange products.
Very much sought after, as you know. Again, it just looks similar, but if you then look into it, the details are phenomenal. So that's the base of what we're going to launch this year.
Mm-hmm. And before we get into the big news,
yes,
this is something new.
We never did white gold blue dial. We never had a blue dial datograph, to my knowledge.
Right.
So that's quite interesting for any collector. Mm-hmm. You know that we did quite a few iterations of this watch. Mm-hmm. They all get nicknames, as you know, and some of them go for amazing money.
Yeah.
I think a fun factor is, I believe they were so rare, or they are so rare, because as we launched them, they weren't really that en vogue. Right. So not a lot of people paid a lot of money for it.
Right.
So very few were built, and today they're very valuable. Mm-hmm. This one, we only produce 125 just to celebrate our anniversary, and that's it.
And that's it. And this is white gold, blue dial.
Wild gold, blue dial.
And what is it about white gold and blue that kind of brought it to the forefront?
I just, you know that we don't do a lot of colors.
Right.
But blue has always been one of the colors. We just never did it in the datograph.
Mm-hmm. And also white gold instead of platinum.
It's just. I think platinum for us is black in the datograph. I simply believe it's a great combination, and people just love that dark blue. Mm-hmm. It's beautiful. The subdials, and again the beautiful movement.
So 125 pieces.
That's it.
Launching this year.
Yo.
And when it's done, it's done.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. We're not good in making a second thing out of the same. So no, 125, and then this one will probably find its way to good wrists and into good collections.
I think so.
I'm pretty sure.
I think so. And you have something else on your wrist.
I do, yeah. It's one of the privileges if you are the CEO. This is the other big one for this year, which is the most complicated datograph yet to come with Honeygold as the case material and the Lumen, which is quite difficult if a dial has so many cuts, because that makes it quite vulnerable. And we mustn't forget it's a crystal at the end. So you have to fix it in a way that it doesn't break and still does the job.
So this is a DATOGRAPH Perpetual Tourbillon.
Lumen Honeygold.
Honeygold.
That's a monster of a word, isn't it?
So this is, if I may say, this is everything that people love about Lange.
I guess so,
one watch.
in one watch.
Yeah. And so this is kind of the culmination of DATOGRAPH.
I would say not only of DATOGRAPH, it's the Honeygold, it's the Lumen, it's the most complicated movement, and debatable. If you look at the movement, it is probably the most beautiful movement we have ever built.
So.
There's always a big debate about the triple split or the double split in this one. I would say personally, because of the big tourbillon that you only can see on the backside, it is just a phenomenal nice watch.
And how many pieces will be made?
50.
Okay, so this will be a tough one to get.
I guess so. It'll go to good wrists, that I'm sure.
So this is a big anniversary, obviously, for DATOGRAPH. No Lange 1 this year.
No, we stick with the DATOGRAPH. We use the DATOGRAPH right now.
Yeah.
We learned a lesson in the past, Ben. If you come with two top watches onto a fair where everybody else also launches a lot of watches, you not only compete with your competitors, you very suddenly compete with yourself. And therefore, we just focus this time on these two watches. Remember, last year we only launched one watch.
Yeah.
The
Another
chronograph. Exactly, chronograph.
Yeah.
As I said, chronograph, we love it.
Yeah.
Simple like this. And you will have to see the big one at the booth. That's quite spectacular.
So there'll be
I mean, that already is spectacular.
Yeah.
But if you see it then in, I think it's about 2 meters in diameter, that's quite impressive.
So there's an oversized DATOGRAPH Perpetual Tourbillon Lumen Honeygold in the booth.
Yes.
Oh, that's cool. That is cool. You know, you're launching 2 really limited watches, right? So what does the average Lange consumer have to get excited about in the future?
First of all, we launched a lot of watches last year.
Right.
We never stopped our rhythm of launching watches. Even through the Corona times, we never stopped. So we always launched watches. However, with the number of watches we launched, we also learned you have to produce them, then you have to distribute them. So there is already a lot of people waiting for the novelties from last year.
I see.
Which we now slowly but surely distribute. And it's still a long year. And as I said, there is another celebration around the corner.
Okay.
But that's not in April. That's actually, as everybody knows, the 24th of October.
Got it. Okay. So there's more to look forward to this year.
Oh, we definitely, as I said, what we did in the last, I think 5 years we started it. 5 years ago, we started to not launch all the watches at the same time for Watches and Wonders. Back then it was January. So we structured throughout the year.
Okay. So we'll be staying tuned then.
Definitely, Ben, definitely. Probably we sit again and then discuss what we do next.
Okay. It's a deal. Well, thank you very much. This
Thank
is always
you,
a
Ben.
treat.
Lovely.